Hello again and welcome to another edition of the Bruce and Bob Show. Bob Mueller with News 2. Bruce Doby, Nashville media entrepreneur, coming to you from famed Jimmy Kelly's Steakhouse in downtown Nashville in the day. This was the place where politicians hung, the backdoor deals, smoking cigars.
And they still do.
And they still do. Also, Hall Strategies, one of our sponsors. Appreciate Joey Hall very much.
Joey Hall loves this show. Joey Hall began his career in Nashville at the Nashville Business Journal and then went on to start his own political consulting /PR/strategic counseling firm, Hall Strategies. They do quite well. Loves the firm, called us up, wanted to buy a sponsorship, and we thank Joey.
Appreciate it very much. A little later, David Plazas, Nashville, Tennessean media engagement editor, will be joining us. We'll be talking all about politics, talking about the tragedy in Orlando, the connection here in Tennessee. Obviously, we lost a Tennessean in that tragedy. And it's really been a sad week, Bruce. I mean, we saw the horrible, horrible effect of what took place in Orlando. And as we were talking before we started taping, this was an attack on the gay community, on the Latino community, on all of our civil rights just to gather. This was a horrible, horrible event in so many different ways, not just aimed at one different branch of the community. And then, of course, his pledge to ISIS makes it a terror attack, and it means it can happen anywhere.
Yeah, the largest massacre other than 9/11 on domestic soil. And to add to that, everything that you said, for all of those reasons, you have a presidential race going on in which this becomes the issue that the two candidates are discussing entirely different approaches to what to do about it. On the one hand, one candidate says, hey, stop every Muslim from coming in, and as well stop people from particular regions of the world from coming in, and the other said, no, that's not the way to do it. That stokes the fires of terrorism. That's giving them what they want.
Because this was a targeted attack on Latinos, on gays, is that a reason for the gay community, for the Latino community to feel more fear, or this person is now dead, he was shot by police and killed, or is this just part of the tactic, the spreading out of terror? This affects this group, terrorizes this folks. Obviously 9/11 affected everyone in the United States, a different approach to terrorism.
Well, I think it's all of the above. I mean, I think it's clearly an act of terror, and he pledges fidelity to ISIS before he shoots these people. But obviously, he had scouted out the location. It was a gay restaurant, and it was obviously an act of a terror against gay people. And you've seen this in New Orleans, and you've seen this in New York, and you've seen. I mean, the history of violence against gay people is longstanding, and there have been books and theses written about this, and so it's all of the above.
And it renewed also, as you said, Donald Trump's call. He doubled down on the ban on Muslims, and it also renewed, as we knew it would, the whole gun rights, gun discussion, gun banning of assault weapons, or some folks will say this wasn't an assault weapon, an AR-15 is actually a semi-automatic weapon, but the whole debate on what should or should not be banned is now topic one.
Topic one, and he says he's going to the NRA now to discuss certain bans. I still think the Democrats own the issue. I mean, the Democrats have tried to get some measure of gun control through Congress for a long time. Obama has repeatedly insisted on some measure of gun control. What I thought was most offensive about Donald Trump was the first tweet he sent out in which he said, I told you so. Just such a tin ear to the situation, which called for, we grieve for those, and we pray for those, and we pray for the families, and we pray for those who are dead. We pray for healing, and instead he said, I told you so. Just an awful response.
I just found it remarkable, and we've been saying this every week in this campaign because we've never seen anything like this, that without mentioning the president by name, and without saying so public or without saying so factually, with innuendo, basically hinted that the president was supporting the terrorists, rooting for the terrorists, treasonous acts. And if you're going to do that, okay, but show me some facts. Don't just do it with innuendo. We've really gone off the reservation as the political rhetoric has developed in this race.
Typical. And treason is what he was.
It was treason.
Right, and you said that before the show so accurately. He was accusing the president of treason, which we ought to hang the guy if he's guilty of treason. He ought to be indicted. He ought to be impeached if he's guilty of treason. So, we get good Donald and we get bad Donald, and the Republicans are hoping for good Donald on a good day, and they don't get good Donald. They get bad Donald, and bad Donald appears to be the guy who's predominating right now.
And, we've talked about this as well a little bit, that, it's a different campaign when it's a primary than it is a general election. He continues to kind of be in a primary mode. The stuff he's talking about, it enlivens his base, it strengthens his base, but does it really grow his base? I'm not so sure.
I don't think it does. And I think you get these, you saw this week, you saw McConnell shut up, you saw John Cornyn say he wasn't going to say a thing about this until after the election, you saw
Ryan
Ryan
shoot him down.
Ryan shoot him down. You saw Lamar himself say,
We don't have a nominee yet.
yeah, it ain't over till it's over. And then Corker reverse course, or at least say, no, this is crazy.
We talked to Governor Haslam today, just yesterday, who
Yeah.
says, is not. He met with him, is still not ready to endorse him. So
Yeah. So I think you're seeing a lot of the, you remove the good base. The establishment part of the wing of the party has to account for at least 25 to 30% of the total vote. Those people sit on their hands and Hillary Clinton wins. I mean, let's talk about her for a second. She's done quite well.
She
has given some
really good weeks,
wonderful
great
speeches
that haven't been refuted by the Republican campaign yet.
The temperamentally unsuited, unfit to be president, great line. I think that really resonates. I think she's finally hitting stride. She's best when she's on the attack. And she unlike those other 16 Republican candidates, she throws a punch.
Spring David Plazas from the Tennessean, the engagement editor with the Tennessean. We appreciate very much you joining us on
Welcome,
the Bruce
David.
and Bob Show. We're kind of low key here, but you heard our discussion. Your thoughts initially, and as the engagement editor, what did you see online? What did you hear from your readers, especially losing a Tennessean? We're connected to this tragedy.
Yeah, Bruce and Bob, thank you so much for the invitation. I appreciate it. And I was at home on Sunday just before church when I got all the news about this horrible attack. And my mind was racing the entire day, and I'm an editorial writer, so I was thinking, what can I say, what should I say? And my first draft was probably a little bit tone deaf initially. Thankfully, it was not published, but I shared it because I said, I'm feeling anger, I'm feeling confusion, I'm feeling all those things that our readers were feeling. And then I gained clarity when I went to the vigil that was called by Mayor Megan Barry that evening, and it made sense. It was coming together through unity and healing. And this is the opportunity that we have to send a very positive message. And what was really interesting was that you not only had gay people talking, but you also had Muslim leaders talking and talking about building bridges. And that was the theme of this week's Iftar as well, which is sponsored by the Faith and Culture Center. You had opening bridges or building bridges between the gay community and the Muslim community.
How do you think folks are seeing this? I mean, you heard my definition, a little bit of how I see it. This was a bigger attack. This was an attack on the gay community, attack on the Latino community, attack on all of our rights just to assemble. But some see it just as a terrorist attack. Some see it as just an attack on the gay community. How do you think the general public views it? I think there's a variety of opinions?
I think there are a variety of opinions. I think what I'm hearing from news reports as of today is that this might have been not a traditional terror attack. This guy was self-radicalized.
Right.
But essentially what authorities have found so far is that his radicalization came from his own interaction with his computer, and that this came down to a power situation. He was someone who had a history of abusing his family, his ex-wife, his present wife who knew that he was planning to do this, and now could be indicted.
Maybe facing charges.
Exactly, just for not alerting authorities for this. So it looks as much as a terror attack, because it definitely is a terrorist attack, but more than anything, it's also a power play. It's someone who abuses someone else because he thinks he can.
One of the interesting things, we were talking about Anderson Cooper on CNN, who's a gay journalist, and you're a gay journalist. Anderson Cooper has been going really hard on the Republicans for, on the one hand, essentially labeling them as hypocrites for expressing outrage at this attack on a gay population, while at the same time favoring measures that do not help the gay community, being against civil unions or against marriage and all that. Do you think it's fair for journalists at this point to go after Republicans and on that issue of hypocrisy?
Yeah, I think since the Republicans happen to be the ones in power, I think it definitely is fair to do so. If you remember in the legislative session, there were 6 bills that targeted the LGBT community, ranging from bathroom access, which didn't go anywhere this term but could come back next year, although this attack might change that. But the bill that did pass was the counseling bill. It allows counselors and therapists to refuse clients based upon sincerely held principles, but the original language was based upon religious beliefs. And so that was clearly targeted at the gay community.
Donald Trump won the primary 15, 20 points here in Tennessee. He will likely win Tennessee in the general election based on the population of our elected officials, as well as who controls the legislature and what we've seen in polling. What are we hearing from Tennesseans about Donald Trump's statements regarding this incident, statements against the president that seem to have really pushed the envelope and, in some people's minds, crossed the line? And he's crossed it before and it hasn't hurt him. And will it hurt him in Tennessee, where he really is pretty strong?
It's really interesting. Prior to this attack, there was a lot of support from Donald Trump from his conservative base, mostly based upon the fact that they didn't like Hillary. That they found Hillary was dishonest. They talked about the email situation, the server, and they liked that Donald Trump said what was on his mind. An interesting situation happened this week where I had a writer who wrote a piece about that Donald Trump is not a racist. It was countering a piece that I had done last week saying, well, this is a racist statement. Well, he pulled it at the last minute. He said, I don't want it published. Precisely because he said for personal reasons. I think that whole conversation, as you're seeing, there's something there. I don't know what's in Donald Trump's heart, but he is certainly developing rhetoric that is anti-gay, that is anti-Muslim. It's certainly racist. I think there is a base for that, but I think it's starting to shrink. There's a report that came out today looking at favorability and unfavorability, and that's growing tremendously, especially among the minority communities.
I think his unfavorable
His
numbers
unfavorable.
like
His unfavorable.
75 or
Yeah.
something like that.
Among the African American community, it's 94%.
Yeah.
So it's amazing to see that.
Okay, so as you look at the Tennessee voter who is a Trump supporter, and Trump is likely to carry Tennessee, how do you describe their love and affection for the man?
I think more than anything, it's sending a message to the establishment, to Washington, that we're unhappy with you.
I think you're exactly right.
We had a reporter who went to a particular county that voted for him, that gave him the highest vote total, and it was the place where Oshkosh B'gosh company used to have its headquarters until it went down to Mexico because of NAFTA. And so there's this sense of disillusionment that somehow people feel disaffected, they feel that there's no hope. And in many ways, there's some parallels between Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders supporters. It's just very different in terms of who the population is. Donald Trump spoke to disaffected white men especially, and there's a reason. I understand it, and I understand it because there are analyses that show that Hillary Clinton has pretty much secured the female vote and the minority vote. But there's also still the white male vote. If white males go out, if evangelicals go out in favor of Trump, although you're starting to see some people backtrack, as you both mentioned, it could help him considerably. But it could be a very close race depending on what happens in the next
Our
few
top
months.
three elected officials have really been trying to walk a tightrope with Donald Trump. Lamar Alexander and Governor Haslam specifically have refused to endorse him, still saying there's time, having discussions. The governor just met with him. Bob Corker, while not endorsing him, did call him and talk about foreign policy and says, you know, if Trump wins, let's have someone with some knowledge, which is actually a smart move. And then he's talked about as a VP candidate. Trump says, Corker says, I don't want any part of that. It's interesting the three biggest leaders in this state, which overwhelmingly went for Trump, are not for Trump.
And I think it's because of Tennessee's history of being a moderate state, and you have really thoughtful leaders. People often evoke Howard Baker, and that he was someone who knew the art of the compromise, who wasn't lacking in self-awareness, who really understood that you have to work across the aisle. And he was at a point when he was majority leader and then minority leader, he had to have the key political skills to make sure that things happened.
Yeah. How do you guys endorse in the presidential? I mean, you don't call anybody in, but so you make because Hillary's not going to appear before the editorial board probably, and Donald Trump won't. How do you make that decision?
Sure, we're actually starting those conversations in July. We're focused right now on the Nashville school board elections, and our process, we're going to be publishing endorsements on July 10th. So right after that, we're going to be convening as a board to ask 3 questions. Should we endorse? How do we endorse? And who do we endorse? And at that point, we'll be making a decision. 4 years ago, the Tennessean editorial board endorsed Mitt Romney. And it was to the surprise of many, both in Nashville and across the country.
Surprised me.
And so this year, I couldn't tell. I'm 1 of 5 votes. So we have the president of our company, Laura Hollingsworth, Michael Anastasi, our new executive editor, Maria DeVarine, our news director, and Frank Daniels, our Metro columnist. And so we'll be coming together to make the decision. My goal, this is just my personal opinion, is I hope that whatever we do, we take a very strong stance and be very direct about why.
Finally, go ahead.
Do you vote, or do you just arrive at a consensus?
So typically we arrive at a consensus. For the Nashville mayoral race last year, we did initially take a few votes. So we kept on going through, we created a process. Exactly. We created a process where we said this is how we weed out based upon a scoring system, a scoring rubric. We came down to our top 3, took an initial vote, had some discussion, and by the end of it took another vote, and then said, okay, we all agree that this is what our decision is going to be.
Finally, what happened in Orlando seems to be a lone wolf. He seems to be the one guy who did this. Still, the gay community in Nashville is growing. Pride Week is coming up here in Tennessee next weekend after this, I believe. We've lost a Tennessean in the attack. Is there reason for concern? Should there be more security? I think the police are already talking about this. I mean, this is now an issue for a segment of the Nashville community.
Yes. I saw Steve Anderson, the chief of police, 2 nights ago at the IFTAR, and we spoke very briefly about that. And he has promised to have more security through one of his spokesmen, Lieutenant Levitt, who spoke at the vigil on Sunday night. They're talking about really ramping that up. One of the things that Lieutenant Levitt told the crowd is that this could have been us. This could have been Nashville. So I think that there definitely is concern, but if anything, it's caused people to want to come out even more. That vigil started with a march that went from the gay bars on Church Street. I wasn't part of the march, but I did end up going to the vigil. And but it was people. It was just packed. It was just a road where people came in and said, "We're not going to be afraid." And that was the message of the mayor as well.
David Plazas, engagement editor for the Tennessean. Appreciate you joining us here on the Bruce and Bob
Thank you.
Show.
Thank you.
Thank you,
gentlemen.
pal. That'll do it for another edition of the Bruce and Bob Show. From Jimmy Kelly's Steakhouse, thank you, Joe Hall Strategies, for helping us out, being one of our sponsors. Thank you for watching. Give us an email if you want us some opinions, some feedback. We appreciate all your comments. We'll see you back here next week.